Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Hello, Trailblazers fans, and welcome to another edition of the Blazers Edge podcast. I'm Dave Deckard from BlazersEdge.com, here with you with Dan Morang as co-host, and we are on Stitcher, we are on iTunes, we are all over the interwebs. We are glad that you found us, whether you download us, listening, streaming, whatever you're doing, jogging, hiking, cooking, or anything more interesting. It's a delight to have you along, and it's a special delight this week because, well, we have some positive stuff to talk about, Dan. The Blazers lost overtime versus the Pistons, but Damian Lillard went crazy. That was a turnover plague game, and they almost won it anyway. But then two wins in a winning streak. Oklahoma City Thunder, Brooklyn Nets. Wow. I mean, what a great time to be a Blazer fan.
The gears of the tank are slamming together, and somehow Portland's managing to string a few wins together. So it's kind of
that's the other argument, I suppose. I mean, I'm going to get your analysis in a second, but I've heard this more than one place. They tried to win, they couldn't do it, and now they're trying to tank, and they can't do it.
But what do you right? It's like, come on, guys, what's going on?
No, okay. Beat the Thunder. What did you see in that Thunder game that you liked?
It was basically a microcosm of the first Thunder matchup. Slam the paint shut, deny everybody else, and make Westbrook be the guy. I mean, if you can keep the Thunder from knocking down outside shots and you can keep them from just demolishing you inside and controlling the boards, it's a pretty simple recipe. The problem is you have to have the personnel in order to execute that, and that means coming in, playing tight, and being physical on defense, and playing good interior defense with your bigs and help side defense. And what we saw was Nurkic get, 5 blocks? I mean, that had. When was the last time Portland had anybody who did that, where it was not only in the stat sheet, but you could feel it in the course of the game, how he controlled the paint for long stretches against a guy like Steven Adams and Russell Westbrook, who are constantly coming down your throat. So it's one of those things where it's nice to see that sort of basic game plan be executed and not be blown to bits, even though you know it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful stats. Steven Adams, 1 for 3, and Sabonis, 1 for 2. They combined the 2 of 5, right, for 4 points total, I believe. And Nurkic himself was 7 of 10 for 18. So that was a pretty good game for him. Okay, Russell Westbrook has 45, but their starting lineup got just demolished.
They got 10 points
by Portland.
10 points from the starting lineup outside of Russell Westbrook.
Right, and as a whole, their starting lineup just stunk. Their bench was good. Their bench was better than Portland's, but the Portland starting lineup just mowed them over.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you get 55 points out of your starters, and the Trailblazers get 55 points out of Dame and CJ, I mean, it's not a stretch to say you're going to assume that's going to be a win, right?
Yeah, probably lights out for you. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players in double figures. Now, not all of them shot incredibly well. I mean, Harkless and McCollum didn't have their best nights. But at the same time, when you can put 6 players in double figures and you can basically take the game out of the teeth of the exact players that are trying to control it, that's pretty good. Now, Enes Kanter did well off the bench for them. Taj Gibson. So there is an asterisk by Adams and Sabonis. It kind of wasn't their game, and B, their bench actually played more than their starters. But still, I want to look at this positively. I want to give this game to Nurk. I want to compare starters to starters because it makes Portland look good, and I want to relish the win.
Yeah, no, I mean, Nurk Mania is kind of taking hold, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. He did exactly what he needed. The questions about Nurk coming in were, is he in shape enough to be out there for long stretches, and he's already played 35 plus minutes, I believe 4 times. I need to double check it. But he is getting all the minutes that he could ever want. The problems that he had in Denver with getting on the floor are not an issue here. He is out there as long and as strong as he wants to be. So that kind of issue's been written away. Now you've got, can he play defense behind Dame and CJ? Well, we've already seen he's not coming above the free throw line, so that's not a thing. But when you keep him in the paint, he's Portland's best rim protector as far as a big man and a deterrent in, at least in Lopez. I mean, it's just too easy to single that out. And that's only been here in a couple of games when he's still growing familiar with the system. So there are plenty of positives to be taken from this, but at the same time, in these wins that Portland's had, they still haven't looked that great. So it's still really weird.
Don't say it now. Okay, 109 points given up. Westbrook scores 45. Their bench goes crazy, but they won. I mean, and Brooklyn Nets. Hey, 130 points the Blazers scored. I mean, let's ignore the fact that they
How many points did they give up to the Brooklyn Nets?
160. Yeah.
Okay, here, there were a lot of good things to take from that game, but I want to put this in perspective. As bad as the Brooklyn Nets are, and they're the worst team in the league, their PR department and one of their beat writers was on Twitter after the game saying, this Nets team is so bad, this is the 4th time they've given up 130 points this season. Well, folks, before December 31st of this last year, the Portland Trail Blazers had given up 130 points 4 times.
Yeah, and the defensive stats in this game basically
don't exist.
Would break your computer. I mean, okay, Captain Kirk could use these to fry the enemy artificial intelligence compute defensive rating for Nets versus Blazers. Smoke coming out, fire exploding. It was bad.
Yeah, but a stoppable force meets a movable object.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not sure they ever met. They just kind of politely bowed to each other and
as they went by each other.
Yeah, exactly. It was an all-star game, but minus the talent. But sorry,
that was an actual spit take.
Yeah, sorry about your microphone. You'll now need a new one, as apparently I do. But Lopez, I mean, he was contained early. Late in the game, I believe, is when he made his mark. But still, it wasn't kind of the dominant thing. And I think we saw the Nurkic dichotomy there.
He made him work for it. I'll give Nurkic some credit. He made Brook Lopez work for it. But Brook Lopez has made a career on making those shots. So
right.
It's a difficult task to ask him to single cover him from the rim to the 3-point line.
Right, and the farther Lopez went out, the less valuable Nurkic's defense looked.
Yeah.
And obviously, look, that's going to be an issue. It's something we've mentioned before in passing. Okay, asterisk by this is that, yeah, Nurk is great. I love what he's doing, and it's a new wrinkle. At the same time, it's going to be the same story as last year. Anybody who can prepare for the Blazers for a 7-game series is going to be able to exploit what they can't do, and what they can't do is still a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's not an all-world Dikembe Mutombo, Hakeem Olajuwon defender. I mean,
no, don't even. Yeah, that's not in the same. Not in only the same sentence. They're not on the same page. But yeah, keep going.
But yeah, I know. I'm just talking just defense in general. I mean, these are guys that single-handedly behind a defense can fundamentally change how you play defense. That's not Nurk, but he is a pretty damn good defender. He can come up and body a guy off. And there's 2 things that I've noticed from him already. One is the fact that, yeah, he's not comfortable coming above the free throw line. But 2, when it comes to the pick and roll coverages, when they do run pick and rolls deeper, there's something he's able to do in that he's got a big body. And he's able to knock guys off their cuts cleanly and off their rolls cleanly. And it breaks up the timing of the pick and roll, which is the bread and butter, is understanding the timing between and the spacing between. And Nurkic is really good about doing that and not getting called for fouls. That's actually a huge, huge thing as far as an underrated skill defensively. Andrew Bogut's of the world are really good at that. The Kevin Garnett, the grab, pull, hold, and just kind of knocking guys off balance. So I think stuff like that is huge. but that's not enough to, give the defensive gravity of I don't know, like a modern day, you could say like Kawhi or LeBron or Draymond or Giannis, who have this ability to come all the way out and then back in and create basically a defensive buffer zone that is a no-fly zone or a no-go zone. He's not at that level, but that's not a knock on him. It's just there are limitations that people probably need to adjust their expectations for.
Oh, they're going to see it once they figure this new version of the Blazers out. But right now, it's kind of party time, and I'm enjoying it, frankly. But look, so Nurk, to me, this seems kind of like a J.J. Abrams thing. My perception of J.J. Abrams, and he's a fine director, okay? Again, no knock. But, so how's he made about $1 billion? He's gone into positions where people have screwed up so badly that even pretty good looks amazing. He's not screwing it up. And Nurk is doing a little bit more than not screwing it up. But seriously, it's like after you've had like rotten, rancid worms on a plate, a Big Mac looks pretty darn good. It's what Abrams done with 2 franchises now. And Nurkic is pretty much, I think he's going to level out. Right now, this is more than Big Mac. He's not quite filet mignon, but there's some steak
if
going
you
on
want
there.
If you want to steal some movie analogies, you can go that the defense of the world is the modern NBA, the Christopher Nolans of the world, directors. You get the Batman franchise, which is kind of the height of superhero movies right now. And you've got, what's it called? Logan that just came out. It's kind of a knockoff version, but it's a pretty damn good knockoff. You're not going to be frustrated with it. You're going to enjoy the hell out of it. And I think that's the same thing with Nurk, is he's going to give you a lot of the things you've been missing and then some. And because of that, you're probably going to overlook some of the plot flaws, as you were. But he's 22, and you got him for Mason Plumlee, and you got a first-round pick for him. That is looking
and you don't have to pay him for 2 years. You don't have to pay him for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's great. A rookie contract. There's nothing wrong with that. So so we're agreed that Nurkic is no Michael Keaton Batman, but he's better than Ben Affleck. So very good. And think about this. How far down was this season? I don't mean like there was the Nets, they'd won 10 games, but really there was no point to this season.
They really weren't that far away.
Right.
Let's be honest, they really weren't that far away from being one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the league. The
Technically
defense,
speaking, they're still not. But
their defense from November to the end of December is literally some of the worst defense I've ever seen in modern day basketball. Not by any stretch of the means hyperbole. It was that they gave up 130 points 4 different times in a span of a month. They gave up 100 points through 3 quarters 9 times in the span of 6 weeks. That's crazy. I wrote it off just the entire season by the end of November. It was just too bad. There was no way you could change that far. But the Nurkic deal has definitely given, at least me personally, much more of a vested interest in watching and analyzing and seeing him grow and how things have changed over the last couple weeks. Not just on the court, but you can see the attitude and the body language differences. He has definitely kicked that into gear.
It's emotional life, basically. There's an emotional life to this season now that was just plain absent after about week 4, which, and again, this is miraculous. Although it does bring up a topic. Apparently at Sloan, Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, said teams that focus only on winning a championship, I'm going to paraphrase now because I don't have the quote in front of me, are basically doing it wrong, foolish. This, to me, highlights the divide. The yes and no of that. Personally, I don't quite think that. But, look, is Nurkic going to bring the Blazers a title? No. Has he changed their prospects of winning a title? I don't think so. But there's something else that they're playing for right now, which is reason to watch, and he's certainly given them that.
And that's exactly what Adam Silver wants. He doesn't want 5 maybe 6 teams with a legit chance. I mean, this is the reality of it. And then 24 or 25 teams who are tanking and fighting for that number 1 pick. Because if they don't do something soon, that is going to happen. I mean, whether it's by ineptitude, like Sacramento, or by process in Philadelphia, teams are going to start going this way. It's just a matter of fact. Eventually, it'll get to the point where if you're not a legit championship contender, you're going to build and draft as many assets as you can so that you can lure a free agent when necessary and draft a superstar as they come along. We've talked about this plenty of times. The main contending teams right now have all been built through the draft. It is the one way that you can narrow the playing field. And
yeah,
that's Adam Silver protecting the product. And I don't blame him.
Yeah, a lot of self-interest in there, of course, on his end. But, I mean, you bring up a valid point. We are going to need to zoom out at some point here and not just ask, well, how's my team doing? But what is this league about? And by the way, I do not think that you can substitute anything besides going for a title in there and still have the same league. I guess you could go the soccer route, have a standard and B standard and people going back and forth. But in the U.S., I think you'll have a hard time selling that. And I think, frankly, that when you put the NBA label on something, people will have a very hard time if they perceive their team as B standard. So we're going to have to look at this and say, is the league headed in the right direction? Is it a disaster if only 2 or 3 teams consistently can win? If those teams shift from era to era, but if the draft becomes one of the only viable ways to get there. And I kind of agree with you. I think that's very suspect. And I'm not entirely sure what to do with it, but we probably want to devote an off-season podcast to that because it's probably one of the most serious issues facing the league long-term. Speaking of serious issues, though, we've covered the one center that the Blazers have that's working. How about the one who isn't? Festus Ezeli got news that he is done for the season to the surprise of almost nobody, but he's not going to play for the Blazers this year. He probably will not suit up for the Blazers ever. Yeah. Do you see let's ask that question first. Do you see any way they pick up his contract next year?
No, there's just no way. And I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, if you've heard me at all, when he first signed the deal, I called it the I failed the MRI contract. And that's exactly what this is, and that's exactly what it turned into. To me, from day one, it was a PR move. They whiffed in free agency, and they needed to get a big. So let's swing for the fences. It's no risk. It's not going to cost us anything more than $1 million next season when we miraculously don't need him anymore. Well, they've got Nurkic. They don't need him anymore. And so he'll be gone.
Right. And by that way, that $7 million contract will now be $21 million contract because of luxury tax for a guy who's not playing. That's just clearly, you couldn't pay that for Mason Plumlee. You're not going to pay that for Festus Ezeli.
Yeah.
Surprised at all about the injury news? Surprised that it developed this way?
Yeah. Surprised that it took this long. I mean, the weird thing about this entire situation was, at first, it sounded like Festus Ezeli was going to play this year. That's how crazy this was. We're in training camp, and we're hearing stories and reports that Ezeli is not only in practice, he's out there in 5-on-5 playing when there was supposed to be no chance of that. And then 2 days later, he's mysteriously not feeling good, and he's not going to be out here, or he's not going to be active for a while. Second assessments, second opinions, and then it turns into, well, we don't know, and it started just, I mean, good God, it was Greg Oden all over again with the way that the Blazers PR handled it. It was either rule him out or don't. I mean, just for the love of God, man, just quit trying to split hairs with it. I mean, how bad is it? Is it bad? I mean, I know the Blazers medical staff has changed drastically since Oden, but their handling of the situation has just been so poor.
Well, I'm not sure I'd call it poor. I mean, because injuries are tricky, and you have some disclosure elements, and you don't want to either bury a guy or exalt him too high. And I think they got burned, frankly, with some of these, with the Aldridge injury, with the Odin injury, where they were giving a lot of information, and everybody was jumping back and forth between polar extremes, none of which were true. And then they took flack for that because they were always north or south of where those expectations were based on the information they gave out. Not that the information was bad, but people's reaction to it was too strong. So I think they probably developed some kind of system or policy where they just do not give out information that they're not dead sure of. But there's another element to it. You just said it is the PR element. Now, do I believe that the Blazers thought Festus would play this year? Yes, I did. I think if they thought he would not suit up for a single game, they would not have signed him. I'm not that cynical yet, but there's incentive to push off that announcement. As you said, Nurkic has allowed them to, but I think distancing themselves from that signing through time and numbness was important. Had they announced in, say, December or November, oh yeah, this guy's totally not going to play, the whole revival that came with this signing, the whole he wanted to play here, the whole storyline would have been real fresh in people's memories, and then that would have been compared and contrasted. Yes.
Well, I mean, and the flip side of this is also that, I mean, does anybody else find it convenient that he's having the surgery now that they have Nurkic?
Perhaps, but I mean,
you don't want to go cynical. I want to go full cynical here.
Yeah. Well, let's just say, even without the cynicism, there was reason to wait. I mean, it benefited nobody to go too soon, not even Festus. And so that's where I think it's actually a smart PR move. But there's a difference between PR and being able to, check reality or check facts or prognosticate what's going to happen. And if you do it off of PR, you can sometimes be led astray. In any case, Festus, we hardly knew ye. I assume you can still get a Festus jersey, but you better get it quick.
They're probably on sale.
Yeah, otherwise, oh yeah. Actually, that's your first clue. When Ric Flair T-shirts go on sale in WCW, he just signed with WWF again. So Festus, they probably went 50% around January. Although we do wish him well. I mean, I hope he recovers. I don't. Do you fault him at all? I don't. I mean, I think this was a good swing for him. He got paid, and it turned out he couldn't play. I'm not saying he was a babe in the woods. He probably had an idea that this could happen, maybe more than the Blazers did.
That's the thing, is I don't blame him in this. I'm going to sound like the real bad guy here, but I think his handling of the situation hasn't been stellar. So I don't know. I don't want to get into it too much, but I think that there's definitely some more going on here that isn't necessarily as clear to everyone else as it may or may not be in reality. I know that sounds really vague. It's just something doesn't smell right.
Let's
just put it that way.
Well, something. Yeah. Well, I mean, we agree on that point. At the same time, I'm pretty firmly convinced that the league works right, and you can understand it best when every side works for their own self-interest, and the other guy's going to do that, and it's your job to do that. That's a GM's job. Work for the interest of the team and his owner. It's a player's job and the agent's job. Work for the interest of the player, and you can get together in the middle ground while still protecting that, and you will come up with a good deal. If all of a sudden you're starting to base deals on PR and who's happy and what's the lovey, warm fuzzies, you're lying. I mean, that's not what it's supposed to be about. Or if it is, somebody's really going to get burned, because as soon as it's in the self-interest of the other person to get rid of happy, warm, fuzzy and to do the thing that makes them money, that's what they got to do.
You end up with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh, Lord. I don't think anybody wants to end up with
Steve
the Los
Nash,
Angeles Lakers
Dwight
right
Howard,
now.
I mean,
well, except for the Buss family. Apparently, about 3 or 4 of those want to end up with the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, they do too. I mean, a few lawsuits here or there. I mean, how would you feel if your family member sued you for ownership of a franchise?
Yeah, there's some debate about whether that's actually happening, and they're trying to present a good public face. I will say
if you want to take a step back and wonder the situation with the Blazers, just be comfortable in knowing that your owner is a comfortable owner and not feuding with his family members over the stability of the franchise. As bad as things may be on the court, there are plenty more things that could be going wrong right now.
Or trading DeMarcus Cousins, but that's another story. Circus peanuts. But anyway, yeah, I will say this. Everybody who thinks that life would be jolly and wonderful being rich, you might have a point. Owning a team, you might have a point. Good luck leaving that to your kids, because this kind of stuff often happens. Anyway, let's leave the poor bud. We don't want to throw them under the bus, so to speak. So, Dan, here's the big question of the hour. The Blazers are now 26-35.
With 2 more wins they should have.
Yeah, well, technically speaking, they are in the 9th position in the West right now. So let's focus on that part of it. They could sneak up on the Nuggets. They're only 2 games behind. Are we ready to say that the 8th seed is something that they should shoot for? Would it be better for them to hit the playoffs or to hit the lottery?
Yeah, it's not even close. Going for the playoffs to me is just... I can't even wrap my head around that. I get that people want the team to be competitive and root for the win and all that great stuff. And I'm not sitting here saying that you tell the players to tank. I've seen comments about this. I've seen questions about this. When I say tank, I'm not saying Damian Lillard needs to go out there and shoot 4 for 20. That's not tanking. That's influencing the game on a level that's, I mean, Tim Donaghy went to jail for that. So let's not go to that level. What does happen is the organization says, Damian Lillard, you're not playing 36 minutes. You're playing 28. CJ, you're playing 26. I mean, that alone right there, dropping both those guys' minutes by 10 plus, isn't, to me, enough to sway almost every game down the stretch.
Shabazz, man, come on. He's going to save the franchise.
He's actually had some pretty good runs out there. And I've actually been impressed with what I've seen from him. And really, that's the stretch run this season. Even if they somehow made a way into the playoffs, I literally wouldn't care. I'd watch the games, but let's just say in some magic world that they upset the Warriors. In what reality is this team going to win another 7-game series? If this was one and done, and everybody wants to point to like the Miracle on Ice or the Warriors upsetting the Mavericks as an 8-1 in, was it 2006, 2007? I mean,
Denver did it to Seattle too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what did they do after that? You're not winning a title. You're not progressing further along. You're getting a little bit. Oh God, you're not getting anything more out of this. It's not happening.
Right.
The stars need to align beyond what the universe is capable of giving to make this happen. So what?
Better chance of winning megabucks than yeah.
Yeah, I mean, literally, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than this team making it to the NBA Finals. So I don't get what the idea is. Just tangible asset management. This team is in a place next season that's not good from a roster construction and a financial standpoint. They can literally alleviate a huge chunk of that by tanking the rest of the season. You have a path forward. Very few times as a general manager or as a franchise or an organization do you have a path set before you that if you take this path, you have a X% chance to improve your franchise. It's not a roll of the dice of, oh my God, am I trading for this player or that player? will they fit or mesh with this team? You have an asset that you can get that mathematically, analytically, if you're drafted in the 1 through 5 position, will increase your team by this %, depending on which pick you get. The value drops each time you drop down a pick. The difference between picking 5th and picking 15th is astronomical.
Sure. Well, and one thing that could bolster your argument is, well, if the Blazers go up three games in the standings, they're in 8th. If they go down 3 games in the standings, they are now behind everybody except the Suns and Lakers, who they probably won't catch ever.
You're putting yourself in a chance to have a top 3 pick. If you fall 5th, I'm trying to remember my math on this. I believe it's an 18 or 20% chance of a top 3 pick. And I believe the math, if you finish 4th, it's either 4th or 5th, I can't remember which one it was now, but you have a better chance at a top 3 pick than you do of a 4 through 6 pick and getting knocked back. That's how often those two positions have rewarded a top 3 pick. And if you're talking about this draft, and you're talking about asset management, and you're talking about roster composition, all these things we've been talking about for a year plus now, or almost a year now, I should say, you have a door that you can open where it's not a mystery box. It's a tangible asset.
Thing is, I'm going to go. I'll go opposite. Not only because I'm the win guy, but because literally what you're probably talking about is the difference between the 16th pick and the 15th pick at this point, and it's not. Now, granted, Miami's better in the East. There are a few teams better in the East, so it might be slightly better than that. But I mean, you're not talking about world-changing events unless you hit those ping pong balls. Otherwise, you're still in the middle. It's still kind of a crapshoot. And sure, there might be a percentage edge, but a percentage edge to what? And what have you done to your franchise now when suddenly everybody kind of knows what you did and why you did it? It's like saying to your players, you're not good enough. We need a real boost in order to go anywhere. And if you don't hit the ping pong balls, you don't get that real boost. Now you're looking at the players that you just told they weren't good enough, and you're expecting them to go out there and perform. That's an issue. But you know what? There's an even bigger one, is that I don't think the Blazers can carry this kind of salary and make the lottery. And unless they hit the ping pong balls, there is no distraction big enough to cover you're selecting 11th because you pretty much sucked and you're paying at the luxury tax line. I think the Blazers need to scramble to get to that 8th seed any way they can. I think that the part... Go ahead.
There's a couple things here. First of all, there's a franchise down the freeway that did exactly this with a team with a ton more talent on it. They tanked the last month of the season. The Golden State Warriors, nobody talks about this because everybody wants to talk about how the Monte Ellis trade netted them a more balanced backcourt. That's great and all. They tanked the end of that season to get the 7th pick and Harrison Barnes. Nobody ever discusses that.
But they also drafted way late to get Klay Thompson, right? And that's, I think, just as significant.
Yeah, that's landing on a pick and doing well. But historically, we're talking about tangible assets and numbers here. Your chance of selecting a player in that top 5 is exponentially higher than in any other group. We can point at every pick and do all that kind of stuff of players that have been successful. But let's say Portland does fall down and they don't want the pick. How much more is it worth come draft night? A 5th pick is worth a truckload more than a 10th pick, especially in this draft.
Yeah, obviously. Package all 3, get to number 2. Anyway, now let's take a look at this. Since you mentioned, since we mentioned the end of the season here, the schedule. First of all, another $1 million question. The Blazers are looking better right now. How much is that schedule related?
It's a little bit of both. Damian Lillard's definitely healthier and absolutely balling out right now. I believe he's averaging like 36 and 6, I think. Can
we vote for him to never go to the All-Star game ever?
The dude just
Like,
needs rest. I mean, literally, he's top 5 in minutes every season, and he's got me. We want to talk about how guys are athletic and it's a grind of a season. He's a 6 foot tall point guard who goes inside. He gets hit a lot. He hits the ground a lot. He's going to the free throw line a ton now. You know how you go to the free throw line? You hit the ground a lot. And I mean, he just needs time off.
In November, everybody needs to tell Damian Lillard they're going to snub him from the All-Star team because he's not good enough. And then in January, they need to do it so that he has motivation all year through to score approximately 45 points a game, like Russell Westbrook, and then it'll be peak Dame all year long. Yeah, I mean, part of it, easier opponents, part of it. How does it look going ahead?
I mean, Portland has 15 games. Well, I guess I should adjust that now. 14 games in 24 nights with the Minnesota cancellation.
Minnesota, we got iced out inside in Minnesota. Only in Minnesota.
When it was 60 degrees outside.
Control your game. Yeah,
that's the crazy thing. It was 60 in Minnie today, so figure that. But yeah, they got 14 games in 24 nights, and that is a ton of games. That is more than a game every other night. I believe there's 4 back-to-backs in that set, and there's only twice that more than one day of rest appears in that stretch. I don't care who you're playing.
Minnesota game in that.
Yeah, and actually, because the way that it adjusts, it's gonna force another game into that section. So yeah, you could be playing the Washington Generals, and it's gonna be difficult. That is a lot of games and a lot of travel. So,
and you know what? Where it's going to strike too is that, Nurkic has not been quite as mobile as the game has gone along.
Big fella's been sucking some wind. There's no doubt about that.
There's some fatigue there. Now start the grind, and the conditioning may prove a little more important. But we'll let that happen as it happens. At least the opponent schedule looks easier, but the actual physical schedule gets tougher, eh?
Yeah, the crazy thing is that Portland basically has a chance to lock down either their tank or to lock down their playoff position here, because they have the tiebreaker over Denver, and they've got 3 games against Minnesota, who's also chasing. So if they win that tiebreaker against Minnesota, all they have to do is come even with Denver or Minnesota, and the spot's theirs. And
so many teams sandwiched. It's nearly. Although we knew, I shouldn't say it's unbelievable. We knew this was going to happen. But Denver, as we speak right now, 34 losses. Blazers 35, Mavericks 36, Timberwolves 37, Kings 38, Pelicans 39, and the Suns are 42. I mean, they're not that
far off. Yeah,
it's just a big old peanut butter mediocrity spread in the middle of the upper crust, and then the moldy bread at the bottom. And the frustrating thing is that the Blazers find themselves here again. You'd think naturally they'd get great or they'd stink, but here they are right in the middle. Now, speaking of that, let's take a look. I mean, obviously, I think no matter what happens, as you said, we are focusing on the summer. I mean, that's the way it is. I hope for a playoff series because life will be more interesting, but I don't think anybody's under the illusion that that's going to make a difference, as you just said. Let's take a look at some of these players, kind of early forecast. How do you think their season's gone? And when summer comes around, how available are they going to be? Let's start at the top and let's package them together. Lillard and McCollum, how would you evaluate their season so far based on expectations or whatever else? And how available will they be come June, July?
Yeah, these guys are the rock, the foundation. And I think with both of these guys, they both have had career seasons. I don't think Damian's defense has regressed by any means. I just think that it was more noticeable in outcomes of games. Last year, everything kind of went right, so it wasn't as noticeable. These are things that we've been harping on or discussing for quite some time. Same with CJ. Both those guys, and let's give a hat tip to CJ. CJ's become one of the best overall shooters in the entire league. Right now, he's leading the league in mid-range field goal percentage, shooting over 50%. League average is just under 40%. So what he's doing, and especially considering the volume of mid-range shots he takes, he's basically LaMarcus Aldridge of mid-range shots, except he's really, really, really good at them. He takes a ton of them, except he makes a ton of them. So
Aldridge was good at mid-range shots. It was just the same mid-range shot all the time.
Exactly. I'm not saying it's a knock to LMA. It's just right. CJ's just that good at that shot. He is the king of the mid-range right now. It's insane. Yeah. So both those guys, I mean, great. They've been phenomenal this year, and you can see what they're giving you going forward. But I think you have to caveat them with the draft, in that depending on what the Blazers do kind of affects what they do. If Portland is bound and determined to keep going with these guys and they make the playoffs, there's probably no chance that either of them are moved. But if they tank, and I mean, they fall all the way down and get one of those top 5 picks or whatever, and let's say the lottery balls go their way and one of those top flight guards are there, maybe you see one of those guys move, because that's a lot of cap space that gets freed up, and it'd be a drastic change. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but that's probably one of the ways that it does happen, is if it goes that way. But as far as those two guys are going, I mean, it would take something extreme like that to increase the likelihood of them being moved.
All right, Nurkic, I don't think we even need to deal with, unless he was packaged with to bring back like a superstar center or something, and all those went at the trading deadline. But
his contract's the most valuable on the roster right now.
That's exactly it.
There's just no way you can move him right now unless it's a no-brainer move.
Yeah, he's making nothing. So let's skip him. Harkless and Aminu, let's package them together.
That's your second, third most valuable assets probably right now. Harkless is giving you, what, 10, 5, and 3 a night on $9.5 million a year?
Yeah. At least his efficiency is okay, so.
He gives you a little bit of everything, and teams around the league, I'm sure they'd like to have him, especially on that controlled salary. Aminu, it's all about offensive confidence with him. As much crap as he's gotten for his inability to knock down threes, something he has done this year is go to the paint hard. Last year, he had a lot of really, really bad turnovers, and this year he's had a lot of really, really bad shots. So apparently every year there's going to be something that's really, really bad. But he has shown that he can actually put the ball on the floor and get to the rim every now and then. He's actually shown a couple nice little inside finishes and post moves. So he's definitely grown in that area. With him, it's always going to be, I think, offensive consistency. He's going to give you the defensive end. He's going to rebound. He's going to block shots. He's going to be that weak side guy. It's going to be there to help you all the time. But the contract value is huge with him. I mean, if the right deal comes across, you want to take it, but at the same time, he's exactly the kind of deal that Portland needs.
Kind of, but I don't think that they can live with the talent. I know the talent to dollars ratio is individually good, but the talent to dollars ratio on this roster overall is really bad. And you're going to have to make some cuts somewhere. Now, we may do it in the next group coming up, but I think if Harkless and Aminu, if somebody chases them hard, the Blazers will certainly have to listen hard. And the problem I see with either of them, as you said, they're kind of, in some ways, all-around players. Aminu, certainly defensive player. Who needs that kind of player? For a contender, that's exactly the kind of guy you need to keep your role going, to play some great minutes for you, and to maybe take you from a championship contender to a real championship threat. But for a team that's short of contention, that kind of player just doesn't move the needle much. I mean, yes, they do hidden things. Yes, the Blazers are probably better with them than if they were totally absent from the roster. But are those dollars spent the best way the Blazers can right now between those two? Or is there an opportunity cost when you aren't at the contention level that carrying this kind of player kind of costs you other people or development of other people even? And I don't see a ton of contenders out there who can give the Blazers anything that's going to make a difference to them. What do you want? Another low draft pick?
And that's the thing. If you're giving it up to a contender, you're not getting anything in return.
That's right. And if you try to give him up to Sacramento, I mean, maybe they'll do anything. But A, what are they going to trade?
The great asterisks of the NBA.
Exactly. But B, what's Sacramento going to do with them? I mean, it's just not. Sacramento can't make use of Rudy Gay right now. And obviously Gay's not an all-around player, but dude could score 20 points. Yes, he's been injured, et cetera, et cetera. But that experiment just didn't work. And he should have been well set up. It's not like they had a ton of other scorers there besides Cousins. And they basically wasted him. I don't think Harkless is going to really stand out with them or Aminu until they get some better talent and players around him. And of course, with Cousins gone, that isn't happening. So what do you do? How do you trade them to a lousy team? Dallas, you got to look at Dallas. They buy players like this. Let's take a look at the next layer. Alan Crabb and Evan Turner. Should the Blazers move them?
Should? Yeah. I mean, anybody who was watching the game on TNT the other night saw the graphic pop up for Alan Crabb, and I do not sit here and try to beat up on Alan Crabb. Alan Crabb is a good player, especially in his own right. He's up there with CJ McCollum as one of the best mid-range shooters in the entire league. He's still shooting above 40% from three. But he just went from making $900,000 a year to $18 million a year. His pay increased 2,000%, and his stats are numerically identical per game from last season. That's not what you pay a guy for, right? You don't pay a guy that much money to be the exact same player he was.
I don't know. I mean, this would be an interesting philosophical conversation we should have sometime. Obviously, in this case, we wish Crabb was better, but there is a certain amount of foolishness that goes with paying a player for what you think they're going to be, rather than playing a player for what they are. And in some ways, those contracts that are vilified, like the veterans who are starting to head down, but you pay a lot to because they've been in the league and they've been stars, in some ways, those contracts are better than paying a guy for what you hope he's going to be 3 years from now, because that often doesn't work out. Now, I think obviously Crabb, he's an exception because I think you're right. They were paying him for what they thought he could be this year, but I mean, his minutes are up. It's not a good idea.
The thing is his minutes are up, his touches are up, yet his usage rate is down. So he's being given the opportunity. He's just not taking it. His shots per minute are down. I mean, there are things there that don't look right. I mean, even when they brought in Evan Turner, Crabb has still been given an expanded role, and yet he's still boxed into the exact same usage style that he was previously, and he hasn't expanded upon it.
Okay, let's stop for a second, though, and ask, is this like a Nicola Batum situation where, I mean, and I'm not going to argue that Batum's had some good times since he was traded, right? But I'm not going to argue that he became a superstar. But his style of play certainly changed when he moved
drastically
to Charlotte. So is this a situation where, hey, if Alan Crabb gets in a better situation, we might see more of him?
I think there could be an element of that to it, but the difference between somebody like, not just Batum, but just somebody like Batum, Nick is a guy that works better with the ball in his hands more than he was getting in Portland. Mm-hmm. The way that the Trailblazers use Nick is the exact same way that they're using Alan Crabb. But Alan Crabb has never been a guy who says, I need the ball in my hands to create or anything like that. Nobody's ever, confused Alan Crabb with the point forward. But he's playing with Damian and CJ too. You got to remember that those guys like the ball in their hand. Yeah, but he's also running with the second unit where he's getting the bulk of touches. He's being used as an outlet.
He's being used as an outlet basically, and that's, if you look at his shooting percentages and his true shooting percentages, he's more or less succeeding in that role. The question would be, do you pay that much money for an outlet player? Is he that valuable to you as a piece of the puzzle? That, as much as anything, is the the shaky point I see with Crabbe.
Well, the
it's
perfect
not just him
example
individually.
Is Wes Matthews. Wes Matthews had an incredibly high usage rate because as that outlet player, he knew his role was to take that shot. And that's the biggest complaint that I've had with Alan Crabbe, is that his unwillingness to take that shot.
And I'm not necessarily arguing against that, although I think comparing Matthews and Crabbe,
I'm just saying offensively. We're not talking about defense.
No, I get it. But I think it's hard to expect of Crabbe what was expected of Matthews, because I think Matthews had a clearer role in some ways and a position when he came in here.
That's
he
probably
was
fair.
Also ended up being a starter. But that said, I agree with your criticism. Probably is not aggressive enough looking for his own shot, but considering that he is being used that way and he's not breaking out of it, he's doing pretty well in that. The problem is the Blazers don't need that. I mean, it's not generating wins, even though it's generating fairly high percentage shots for him. And I'm not entirely sure that that's just him. It's just that they've got an archetype of a guy who can't handle the ball but scores really well in the mid-range and shoots great from long range, and you can pass the ball to him and not worry too much, and they kind of do that, and it's kind of not helping. And that's somewhat roster construction more than that guy. Now let's move on to we got two left really significantly. We didn't talk about Evan Turner. Do we agree that if the Blazers can trade Evan Turner, they probably should at this point?
I like Turner. I like him as a player, and that's not a secret. It's just the deal is it's a deal breaker. I mean, if you can get him for anything of relative concern, it's worth doing.
Ed Davis, same kind of thing, just because he's not being used.
And we haven't even talked about that. I mean, Ed's out for the season now with surgery. So, yeah. I mean, what's his timeline for recovery now? I mean, how much interest are teams going to have in a guy whose shoulder surgery is one of those weird things? I mean, you saw the way Myers came back. So, I mean, if at this point in time, it's going to be a while before Ed's fully ready. I mean, typically it takes about a year to come back fully from that. So we're talking about basically the end of next season before he's supposed to be back at full strength, full mobility, all that kind of stuff, depending on the severity of the surgery or the injury and the surgery.
At the same time, if it's not that bad, I mean, if he can play, the dude's only making $6 million. Somebody's got to want him, right?
Yeah, and then that's the thing. That's the operative
well for the Blazers last year.
Yeah,
so
he can definitely give you plenty.
So I would gauge him a good candidate for his sake and for the team's sake to move him, which leaves us with our two wunderkinds, Myers Leonard, Noah Vonleh. Would either of those be available? What's the ups and downs of doing that?
I'm sure they're both available. I mean, everybody on Portland's team is available, and that's kind of the operative sense of the word, and that they're all fair game. Myers over the last couple of weeks, I think, has done really well and done some really good things. He's had a little bit more of a controlled role, but then again, it's kind of bounced around. It's just not bouncing around quite as much, I should say. Vonleh has, I feel in some way, regressed from what he was. So I don't know if you get anything of value for him, but again, he's got one more year left before the rookie deal's up. So if you play it out and he walks, I don't think it's a big loss. At this point in time, I just haven't seen enough growth in him to warrant anything. With a guy like Myers, and yeah, he's divisive as far as what side of the fence you fall on, but there were two things that he gave you skill-wise before he got his contract that you were counting on. Interior big body defense and the ability to knock down threes. What does Noah Vonleh give you? When you think Noah Vonleh, other than prototype power forward body, what does he give you?
Yeah, I mean, he's a big who shoots, about 65%, 2 out of every 3 shots within 10 feet, which he's not at the rim as much as some, so we got to give him that, right? But his true shooting percentage is 46%.
That's god-awful.
That's a really kind of ugly number. And so, yeah, he's kind of killing you in that sense. And, the defense, I'm not sure it's there. Rebounding, he can rebound, so that's fantastic. He's one of the Blazers' better offensive rebounders, along with Davis, ironically. But
it sounds like
look,
you've just described Thomas Robinson.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little different, but yes, in essence, which is why I think obviously Vonleh should be available. Myers Leonard at this point, I mean, again, is that a place where you can clear salary?
Yeah.
And this is the reality that the Blazers are going to have to face. We may not be talking about a ton of return for some of these guys. They may just have to move a couple people. If they can't move Turner, and if they don't want to move,
you've got to move the other tertiary guys to make room for another player. You've got to move like
3 of them. Yeah. I mean, just to get that salary under control, and you're going to have to make some. You're not going to be able to do it all at once. You're going to have to make some $9 million, $10 million contracts for nothing kind of deals, second-round picks and stuff like that. I'm hoping that they can be a little more efficient than that, but I mean that may be the reality. And speaking of the reality, we're almost up. Is there anything else we have left?
It's just. I think the big takeaway right now is when we look at this, which way we're kind of going as far as tank or the schedule, and there's all these kind of things that we kind of get wrapped up in. But the one cool thing is that it's Blazers Edge Night. By the time this podcast is coming up,
a couple days away. In fact, when you hear this, there will be a contest ongoing. We are actually giving away a couple tickets that we bought. You need to be in Portland in order to win them. I mean, otherwise, obviously, you can't use them. But a fun little contest that I hope people will like, or at least be intrigued or interested with. So, yeah, and it's 2,000 kids and chaperones coming to see the Blazers play the Sixers. When you and I talk next, that will be in the past. We'll be able to talk about that.
That'll be a little bit weird. I don't want to get too much into time travel or anything. And then there's possibly a rumor, and I'm going to drop this out there, and just so you have to either confirm or deny it, that we might even podcast from the Blazers Edge staff dinner.
There might be a possibility of that if we can make it work technically. And boy, that staff dinner, we got not quite everybody can be there because some are in Australia and some are in
we're in what, 17 time zones? Something ridiculous like that. There's a lot of time. I'm not sure there are 17, but there's a lot. So we're spread across the globe. But those who are in the local area are basically coming. So that's going to be we're going to have a little staff get together, and we might bring you some different voices, allow you to meet the people, and it should be fun. So I'm looking forward to it. You and I will actually be in the same room. It does happen once a year. It's kind of crazy. Well, I guess theoretically, or more true to the point, it's more twice a year with Blazers Edge Night and then a staff dinner.
That's right. So
2 whole days.
Yes, 2 whole days.
Which anybody will tell you with me is more than enough.
What have I done? I do not merit this. The bounteous glory that comes from being in Dan's presence.
Well, I guess with that, folks, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Again, we got Blazers Edge Night coming up, so I want to thank everybody who donated or spread the word. 2,000 kids getting to go is a huge, huge deal.
Stupid Joel Embiid. Why did he get injured now? Couldn't you wait a week?
And we couldn't trade for Nerlens. That was kind of my sneaky deal that I was hoping for happening. Was it would be Nerlens Noel revenge night. We don't get to see that happen. So Nurkic revenge on the entire world for not fielding a good center anymore. All right. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it there. This has been the Blazers Edge podcast, and for Dave Deckard, remember you folks, you can find us on iTunes, on Stitcher. Like, subscribe, leave us reviews, all that good stuff. And until next week, go Blazers!